Go ahead and start our meeting. Call this meeting to order. I'm Nancy Bradley, and I'm the chair of the Abtel Committee. I want to welcome everybody. This is our second advisory committee meeting for this year. It's, I think, the one we've had the most people face to face, which is just phenomenal. I know. I want to thank Jen Johnson and her staff for the work that they do to get ready for these meetings. I will say I feel like a bit like I'm in study hall, but that's all right. As our meeting progresses, please make sure that you make any comments that you access the microphone. And last time we had feedback that they had trouble, they could hear, like when we had main speakers going on, that they couldn't hear all of the feedback. So if you could make sure you do that, I would greatly appreciate it. That'll help Joan and the those that are zooming in. I think I'd like to take a moment first and let everybody have a moment to introduce themselves, say where they're from. I'm Nancy Bradley. I serve as a member at large, and I am from Virginia Tech. I'm Assistant Director of Academic Programs there.
Good morning. I'm Peggy Schindler. I represent the higher education private institutions, and I'm the Director of Education at Randolph College in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte Williams. I am a classroom teacher for Norfolk Public Schools.
Good morning. I'm Shelby Elliott. I am with Prince William County Public Schools. I'm an HR administrator for certification and compliance.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Gross. I'm from Richmond City. I am a past president of Virginia PTA and I'm a parent member.
I'm Sherry Hatton. I'm a middle school band director in Smithfield, Virginia, and an arts integration specialist for the Institute for Arts Integration and STEAM.
Good morning, greetings and salutations. My name is Jessica Jones. I'm an agricultural education teacher and FFA advisor at Tunstall High School in the great county of Pennsylvania. I live in Gladys, Virginia.
Good morning, I'm Steve Whitten. I teach 6th grade at Bluestone Middle School in Mecklenburg County.
Good morning. I'm Tracy Mercier. I teach students with special needs in Bristol, Virginia.
Hello, I'm Mary McIntyre. I'm a reading specialist in Albemarle County, just outside Charlottesville, Virginia.
Good morning, I'm Selena Dickey. I teach 6th grade language arts and history at Taylor Middle School in Foster County.
Good morning, I am Andrew Dare and Dean of the School of Education at VCU and also Vice Chair for Abtel and represent public higher ed.
Hello, I'm Andy Cox. I represent Public Higher Ed 2, and I'm the Director of Teacher Ed at the University of Virginia's College at Wise.
Hi, I'm Janine Connolly. I'm a grade 4 teacher in King George County, Region 3.
Hi, Gary Carter, training manager, Newport News Shipbuilding with the Apprentice School.
Good morning, Nancy Welch. I'm the current division superintendent serving Matthews County Public Schools and proud PTA member.
Good morning, Travis Burns. I'm the principal of Northumberland High School. I'm also the past president of the Virginia Association of Secondary School Principals and now the president-elect of the Virginia Association of School Principals.
Good morning. I'm Leanne Holton, attending my first Abtel meeting. I teach education policy at George Mason University, and I'm here representing the Board of Education.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Andrews. I'm a secondary special ed teacher in Region 1, teaching in Henrico County, and welcome to from Henrico County, and a proud VEA member.
Good morning, Dr. Joan Johnson, Assistant Superintendent, Teacher Ed and Licensure.
Good morning, John Elton Walker, Director of Teacher Education.
Good morning, Meg Homer, Engagement Specialist with City DOE.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see everybody. I'd also like to give our guests a moment to introduce themselves. So I'll bring Mike back there and tell you, let us know in what capacity you're here to visit us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leslie Sale. I am the Director of the Office of Policy at the Virginia Department of Education, and joining you all today to share a little bit more about the legislative session here shortly.
Morning, my name is Jim Chapman. I'm the Regulatory and Legal Coordinator with the Virginia Department of Education.
Good morning. My name is Daphne Folsom. I'm coming from Chesapeake, Virginia, and I am the 2022 Virginia State Teacher of the Year.
Good morning, my name is Ida Ostrowski, and I represent my little company called Licensure Solutions here in Virginia.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We welcome you to our Abtel meeting. Members, as a part of the email that was sent out, there was an agenda included. Jen, is the agenda up to date? Okay, so we need a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Please say your names along with it. All right, for Jessica, do we have a second?
Second, Peggy Schindler.
Okay, thank you. And do we need to do a roll call vote?
Nancy Bradley,
Aye.
Andrew Dare,
Aye.
Andy Welch,
Aye.
Peggy Schindler,
Aye.
Gary Carter,
Aye.
Janelle Connolly,
Aye.
Tracy Mercer,
Aye.
Charlotta Williams, Selena Dickey,
Aye.
Mary McIntyre,
Aye.
Stephen Whitten,
Here. Aye.
Sherry Halton,
Yes, aye.
Jessica Jones,
Aye.
Jennifer Andrews, Diane, Andy Cox,
Aye.
Sarah Gross,
Aye.
Shelby Elliott,
Aye.
Travis Burns,
Aye.
Mr. Patello, I know he's not here, I think he's trying to log in on the website. And I don't think Senator McLaughlin, and
Okay. Also included in the packet that we got was the draft of the minutes from our January 31st meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes as distributed? Yes.
In the minutes, there was something that I seconded, and I'm trying to pull it up, I'm sorry. And the word seconded was left from the, there were several motions in a row. Sorry. The first or last one? Andrews, Jennifer Andrews, so it was.
it's on page 4.
Page 4, just up below the table. Andy Cox moved, Jennifer Andrews seconded for the, everything except Virginia Tech and Randolph. The next motion, Eric Moffa moved and Jennifer Andrews moved. The approved moved is the missing word. Or seconded, sorry, seconded. And that was for Randolph College. Could you just repeat that? Yes. Yes, this is Jennifer Andrews. On page 4, the motion to approve endorsement programs at Randolph College. It says Dr. Eric Moffa moved and Mrs. Jennifer Andrews the approval. The word seconded. A motion to pass should be inserted in that line.
Okay, thank you. Any additional amendments? Stephen Whitten. Hang on, you gotta have a mic.
On page 2, my name is misspelled. It's Stuphen. Thank you.
Okay, any other amendments to the minutes? All right, with no further amendments, do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved, Nancy Welch.
Charlotta Williams, second.
Okay, that was moved by Nancy Welch and a second by Charlotta Williams. All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. And Jen, do I need to read that out loud, the email that you sent? Okay.
I just highlight.
Okay. We received an email from Monique O'Grady, and she's a 24-year-old Arlington Public Schools parent who just completed a four-year term on the Arlington School Board. And she wanted to share information about Arlington Public Schools Montessori program. She says that she is on here because the current teacher crediting system lacks a dedicated needed pathway to highly qualified teachers trained in the Montessori pedagogy to teach our public Montessori students. And so she goes on to request that that's something that we consider. She said that Arlington has found that there are many Montessori teachers that want to teach in APS Montessori classrooms, and while they meet the rigorous and science-based Montessori training to be certified to teach Montessori, they not always also have a corresponding public school license. And she comments that this is something that is done in other states. She says 2 years ago, Arlington area delegate Patrick Hope introduced legislation to help add Virginia to the list. And says today, Abtel is examining more than 100-page applications submitted by the Arlington School Board seeking an alternative route for Montessori teachers to teach in public school classrooms. And so she's asking that we consider that. She says this is an issue needing urgent attention as there are current APS classrooms in the preschool and middle school space where APS can't hire Montessori teacher applicants because of the current barriers. We hope that you will recommend approval of this application swiftly so the Board of Education can follow suit and allow our program to continue to thrive and serve our students with knowledgeable, highly qualified staff.
The ones my teacher did not vote, we just had the motions on the minutes.
Oh, okay, so we still need to do a roll call vote. Okay, so we need to do a roll call vote on our minutes. I had it in my notes, I just didn't do it. So.
Nancy Bradley,
Aye.
Nancy Baird, Nancy Welch, aye. Peggy Schumer,
Aye.
Gary Carter,
Abstain. I was not.
abstain. Can you repeat that, please?
Abstain
For Gary Carter.
for Gary Carter,
Not in attendance.
as he was not in attendance.
Danielle Connolly.
Aye.
Tracy Mercer,
Aye.
Charlotta Williams. Selena Dickey.
Aye.
Mary McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Whitten.
Aye.
Sharon Patton.
Aye.
Jessica Jones. Jennifer Andrews.
Aye.
Diane, who's not here. Andy Cox.
Aye.
Sarah Gross. Abstain. Abstain for Sarah Gross.
I was absent.
Okay, abstain for Sarah Gross. She was absent.
Shelby Elliott.
Aye.
Travis Burns.
Aye.
Patello.
Okay. All right. Are there any others who wish to address the board at this time? Any other guests?
Can I change mine to abstain because I wasn't at the last meeting? Sorry about that.
That's all right. Change Andrew Dare to abstain as he was not in attendance in our last meeting. Okay, I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Jen Johnson for a discussion of the dates for Abtel meetings for the 2022-2023 academic year.
Thank you. I have on the slide, I think my mic is working. Based on precedent pre-pandemic, as we know, we meet 5 times during the year and typically on Mondays. And based on precedent from previous years, again, before pandemic, I model the recommendations for the 5 dates here. And that is September the 19th, November the 7th, February the 6th, March the 6th, and April the 3rd. Again, they would be at the same time, 9 a.m. start on Mondays. And as you notice from today, we are attempting to integrate using the day also for the committees, the teacher education committee, as well as the licensure committees to meet on those days as well at 11 and having a working lunch for those committee minutes moving forward. So again, I'm proposing September the 19th, November the 7th, February the 6th, March the 6th, and April the 3rd. As we know, our last date will be April the 19th, next week.
Okay.
If there are no other questions or concerns,
Okay, the next item on our agenda is advisory board members' terms of appointment, and Joan will also update us on the terms of appointment for Abtel members.
thank you, Nancy. As we know, the board consists of 21 members appointed by the Board of Education. Board members are appointed for 3-year terms. No member may be appointed to serve more than 2 consecutive terms. As we know, the names highlighted on the screen were offered first terms or continuing in second terms, and they have accepted. We are going to lose 4 members. And for that process, we have communicated the need for a division superintendent, a business community, and 2 classroom or elementary specific teachers for the next session. The SUPS memo will go out on behalf of the board on the 18th of March. I think they'll have a month for nominations. In turn, the board will review those recommendations prior to or for the June 22 meeting and make decisions and final selections for recommendations on the 4 positions that we are losing. We will have formal recognition of those that will be moving off the board. So again, we appreciate you so much and we'll formally acknowledge you in our last meeting. So hopefully you will be able to return as well for those meetings. I see a question.
Yes. Do they need to be from a specific region?
Well, we attempt to try to have representation from all regions, but again, the SUPS memo will go out and explain the terms and the commitment requirements and the desire that it be representative of all of our regions. But we will look at the combination of the board in general and make decisions to hopefully encourage, again, the representation across all regions. But again, we want to thank everyone for your commitment. A few tears as I just started, and some of you have been working with for quite a while. But again, we will recognize you formally next April the 19th, I think, is the next meeting.
Okay. All right, and then the next item on our agenda Joan is still on the stage, updates from the Virginia Department of Education on passing scores for the Praxis Middle School math test and mathematics, revisions for the guidelines for uniform performance standards and evaluation, and then educator preparation programs, the new endorsement program submission and new online system.
So, and again, we appreciate and acknowledge our board liaison today. I'm glad that she's with us and hopefully she can chime in as well. And so as we follow up on the heels of the most recent board meeting that was held in March, we wanted to bring to you an update on several of the Abtel recommendations. So I will highlight first, as we know, the math pass rate. There was a request to establish the math Praxis and the middle school math Praxis assessment cut scores. And so as this group knows, we waited for a couple of sessions as there was a change in administration until we have now implemented a process where the new state superintendent is able to and had an opportunity to review those items, as well as additional research. She completed, she actually, I think, met with ETS representatives and explored various data samples that we provided her on the cut scores, the impact of those cut scores in our state, and was briefed on the shortages as well. And much of the discussion that we had here that highlighted some concerns about having qualified teachers in the math area. And so to that end, the state superintendent chose to recommend the cut score pass rate that was recommended by ETS. So again, the Abtel recommendation was not accepted, and she proposed the cut score that the ETS Multi-State Standard Setting Committee established. So we had recommended, the board had recommended a -1 below. And so she rejected that and the board accepted that. And so the two cut scores have been established in final review from that. And so in addition to that, we brought forward for final review, the principal and superintendent performance evaluation, as you remember, which includes a new standard focusing on the cultural competencies. And so that was approved and has moved on now in the final review based on the board's approval. And you'll hear more about that, but as you know, we have had some delays as we waited for the board to make a final decision on those. And so you'll hear more about that. I believe the superintendent is also going to be sending out an email, which is a follow-up on some of the training that relates to that. I know some of the school division reps were quite concerned about that. So moving ahead, the implementation remains the same. School year 22-23, as well as our EPPs will also receive a follow-up from our Director of Teacher Ed this week. We hope to also provide you an opportunity to document how your programs will align with those competencies that match the legislation. And again, we'll be providing more details. The Director of Teacher Ed will be following up with our universities on that as well. Also, for first review, we presented the reading assessments, the Praxis assessment, based on your recommendations for the elementary special ed and the reading special ed Praxis. And so both of those were approved at the ETS and aligning with your recommendation as well. So those will be moving forward and implemented as well. So as a reminder to you, remember that this new Praxis will replace the RVA in the state. So, RVE in the state. And so there will be a new Praxis for elementary/special ed, at least 3 or 4 different special eds, and then a unique reading specialist new assessment as well. And so those will move into effect in July. So we will also be sending out a licensure update to all of the divisions and contacts, as well as the EPPs regarding that. But again, the 2 new assessments will replace the RVE. Thank you, Dan. And I guess I'll just highlight that we have shared with the EPPs, the universities, the opportunity to submit new programs. I think that's due March the 31st. And we're excited. We're using a new online system. So John Hill is leading that effort. So I just wanted to make you aware. I think most of the universities have been on trainings, calls with her, and are preparing for that as well. And I think that concludes my updates. Thank you, Nancy. Any questions?
Yes. Was there any consideration for allowing the new test for the RVE to replace? We've discussed within Abtel that, elementary educators have to take 4 sections of the Praxis, the RVE, the BCLA, and that the section for the new Praxis is considered much more rigorous than even the 4th section of the Praxis 2. And was there any consideration for allowing that to replace that section?
So not at this time. That will require a formal recommendation that's separate from establishing the cut scores. And so this group, especially the licensure subcommittee, I'll be looking for a formal recommendation and some analysis to move that forward in the coming months. Oh, I also want to highlight the new reading assessments will align with the Literacy Act. Many of us are familiar and will be briefed on the new Literacy Act. And so those 2 assessments also will be used as the board recommended rigorous test for that requirement as well.
Okay, any additional comments or questions regarding Joe's updates?
So on the new reading test, will there be an implementation date? So for students who took it just recently, will they be grandfathered in?
Yes, same practice, yes. So if they took it during the time and meet the cut score at the time, then they'll be grandfathered in. Only those moving forward after, I think it's July, we're going to use the July, they'll have time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, and we now need to move on to the most exciting part of our meeting. Johnny Altorber will introduce us our Teacher of the Year.
Good morning, everyone. There are the Oscars for actors. There are the Grammys for musicians. There are the Oscars for actors. There are the Grammys for musicians. What do we do for our educators? Special recognition of educators is far and few, but at the Virginia Department of Education, we love to celebrate our educators. And I have the opportunity for our teachers to highlight our stellar accomplishments of our teachers in the classroom and beyond through the Teacher of the Year program. Today, it is with much delight that I introduce to you one of those educators, Daphne Folsom, second grade teacher at Port Locke Primary in Chesapeake Public Schools, is the Region 2 Virginia Teacher of the Year and the 2022 Virginia Teacher of the Year. I present to everyone Ms. Daphne Folsom.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Daphne March Folsom. My personal pronouns are she, her, ella, maestra. My kids call me Miss. I'm fine with all of that. My time is short, but I hope that beyond my few moments here that I can stay connected with anyone who's interested and just hearing some of the things that we do in Chesapeake or some of the things that I do. So, am I clicking? Yes. These are my babies. And before I get started, I want to mention that our kiddos bring so much into the classroom. They bring in their joy, their previously learned knowledge. Sometimes they bring in trauma and things that they argued with their brother about yesterday. So I want to note that it is important as an educator for us to bring our whole selves into the classroom as well, because our kiddos are doing the exact same thing. So to my kids, I am Miss Folsom. That's my mom, that's my dad. And to them, I am their very first born, and they have been nothing but supportive. So, hey, mommy, dad, love you. They call me their firstborn. I also have some brothers and sisters, and they call me their sister. And I'm also an aunt to a whole bunch of nieces and nephews. These are two of them right here. Hi, babies. Auntie loves you. As a traveler of 21 countries and counting, I consider myself also an explorer. And the whole state nominated me as the Virginia State Teacher of the Year, so that's another title that I'm bringing in. And I'm really excited to carry that as well. Because of that, I've also been among the top 56 educators in the entire nation, so I've been inducted into the 2022 National Teacher of the Year cohort, which has been really, really cool to get to know all of the amazing people representing the entire nation. I am also an ally for a lot of things that are going on right now. And I am an encourager as I have my kiddos speak words of affirmation every morning. This little mirror is sitting right outside my classroom. And April 19th, I will be probably carrying the most important role ever in my entire life. My little Journey is coming. Her name is actually Journey, and she will call me Mommy. So this work for me is not just professional, it is also personal. And I bring every bit of myself when I come into the classroom. I hope this works. You have your phone right in front of you. Could you QR code this and answer in just one word, who are you? If you are not able to QR code it, you are also welcome to go to menti.com and enter this code. My ask is that you think of one word that describes you. the top of your mind when you think of who you would bring to the classroom if you were an educator, if you were to visit a classroom, if you were a non-educator. And you can cast up to 3 votes, but that first one is probably going to be the most salient for all of us. If you're able, can you click on the QR code and we can populate the responses that are coming? I hope it works. If not, we can use our imaginations.
Click on the QR.
Yes, ma'am. Could go back and then hit a skip.
Sometimes, when you're presenting the, flipping it to the state.
Well, here's a teachable moment, everyone. When you're in the classroom and your technology doesn't love on you like you want it to, I'm just going to ask a couple of the folks that are actually here today. Yeah, see if it's okay. It's okay. A couple of the people that are here today, could y'all just popcorn out some words that you bring to the spaces in which you share with others? Mentor. Love. Empowerment. Passion. Support. Advocate. So even in this space of maybe 20 folks or so, you can see that we all are bringing different parts of ourselves into the spaces that we share, and our kids are doing the exact same thing. I want to share a few tips and tricks with you all this morning about just some ways that I navigate education. And the number one thing is being authentic with yourself and others, and we'll carry right into that. As you are in the classroom or you're interacting with different students, my ask is that you consider all of your intersectionalities. Are you a mother and a friend? Are you a sister and an aunt? Are you a brother and a coach? As you're bringing those things into the classroom, it is important that you recognize your students are doing the exact same thing. We do this in my classroom. We interlock our pointer fingers. This means I have a real life connection. Ms. Folson, you just said something that struck my soul, and I want to share how it relates to my personal life. I encourage this every single day because when my babies can make a personal connection, it makes things sticky for them, and it allows them to make my material and the material that the state bestows upon us tangible, and it makes it relevant. If you're an educator and you're listening out there, raise your hand if you ever heard your kids say, "Why do I have to learn this?" Almost everyone in the room is raising their hand if you can't see, but the kids are going to ask, whether they're in kindergarten or in 12th grade. They want to know, why is this important to me? So if you bring in your personal connections to the classroom, you're encouraging the students to do the exact same thing. And so it makes it sticky, and it's like, okay, I can do well on this test because it means something to me. I need to know this number for X, Y, and Z, or that vocabulary word is going to help me somewhere. So the second thing that I want to encourage everyone to do is to build relationships. People think as an educator, you only need to build relationships with your students, but that's not the case. You have to build relationships with the parents in the community as well as the faculty and staff. If you're a brand new teacher and you have a mentor, they're going to tell you the relationships that you build are going to be key to your success or lack thereof. But first, I want to talk about the relationships that I build with my kiddos. I'm a second grade teacher, so they're still doing soccer games, they're still cheerleading, they're still going to all kinds of recreational sports, they still have birthday parties, and sometimes they invite me, and I love to go to them. I found that I really like the Chuck E. Cheese pizza because I've been there so many times. But that's just one of the ways that I build relationships with my kiddos. They've invited me over for Easter. They've invited me over to just show me the new toy that they got for Christmas. Another thing that I do to build a relationship with my kiddos is learn their names and actually how to pronounce them. I am a teacher of many cultures, so a lot of my kiddos come from Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, and so it is important for me to learn their cultures as well, and that extends into the home. So when I'm getting to know my kiddos, I'm also getting to know their parents. I call them at the beginning of the year and I say, "Hey, I'm Ms. Wilson. Let me show you all the cool things that we're doing in the classroom, and please give me your input throughout the next 180 days. It is important to me." So I'm building an alliance with not just my kiddos, but also their parents. That extends into the community. I've been working at Chesapeake for 5 years now, and I know that we talk about the lady who works at the cash register at Food Lion. We know the people who work at the Dollar General up the street. We know the person who drives the buses. So it's important when you can refer to something that the kids see every single day. And I saw I know you're a teacher, you ever seen your kids in Walmart, and you shop there too? Yes, baby, I need bread too. So little things like that, when they see you in the community, it just makes the relationship inside the classroom that much stronger. And lastly, building relationships with your faculty and staff. If you ever needed anything and you have to call your secretary, if your secretary doesn't like you, it's hard. If your janitor doesn't like you, it's hard. So at the beginning of the year, I make it my point to build strong, authentic relationships with them. I'm not just being nice because I'll need them, but I literally love all of the people that work inside of my building. And it makes it much easier to walk into a place I have to be every day because I want to be there. So building those relationships is very key. There's a lady, the late Rita Pearson, she did a TED Talk, and she says, kids don't learn from people they don't like. True story, or no? So if you're building relationships with your kiddos, you're gonna have to learn that much easier. The third thing I want to share is granting grace. Teaching is hard. There's no other way to put it. It's hard. It's hard every single day. It's hard for a multitude of reasons. And normally it isn't the kids. It's like everything else that comes with it. But I still get up and I still go to school every single day because deep down, I love doing this work. But when things are hard, I have to realize grace needs to be granted. And I want to share that with every single person. Could you go to the next? So year one. And you think, oh my goodness, this is my first year teaching. I'm gonna rock this out, and then you've got systems in place, and then the principal walks in and the kids are like, party time! And they look at them like this, and I'm like, what did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? What happened here? So we've all been there, and it doesn't have to be just education. In any field, you think you've got it going on, and then your administrator or your boss walks in, and then you look around like, what have you been doing the past 5 years, 5 weeks? And just, it doesn't show up. So there's two parts to this. One, you can't see the entire picture in just a moment. So principals out there, when you walk into your teachers' classrooms, it's just a small smidget of the space and time that you're sharing with them. Grant them some grace, but teachers also give yourself some grace. We know it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. No day is perfect, but also your kids are literally going to show out the moment that they're supposed to be on the best behavior. Secondly, teachers, if you're a brand new teacher and you are being observed, don't try anything new because your kids are going to say, Principal, so we've never done this before. This is fun. Something like you should be doing every single day. So don't try anything new when you are being observed because you're going to get busted. But inevitably, you're going to come across some challenging situations. And I encourage each and every one of you, regardless of your field, to grant yourself some grace and find those beautiful moments in each of those days. So I'm on a mission to go to all the world wonders, right? Machu Picchu, Great Wall, the Wall of China, all of those things. And the cool thing that I want to do in front of it is jump in front of it and have someone capture that picture. It's hard. So if the person needs to know how to operate a camera, right? You need to know how to jump and count on 3 and then breathe at the same time. Like tuck your legs up. And so this is 2015. I made it to Machu Picchu in Peru. And I'm like, cool, let's get a regular picture because this might be the best one I get. Next picture, please. This is me falling a bunch of times. It reminded me of being in the classroom because here I am trying to get a picture of me jumping in front of something magical. And I'm having a lot of mistakes. Finally, I kind of get it. I look a little awkward, but it's okay. I still celebrate the moment, right? And then at the very end, I sit down and bask in it. Teachers, you're going to want to do all of these glorious things. You're going to want to capture that picture of you jumping in front of this masterpiece. You're going to fall. You're going to rip your jeans. I swear my jeans were full when I walked into Machu Picchu, and I walked out with holes in my knees. That's okay. You're going to get your hands dirty. And then you're going to meet people along the way and say, here's how you take the picture. Here's how you capture it on the count of 3. And here's how you enjoy the moment after you've captured something beautiful. Teachers, it's okay if you don't always get your picture of you jumping in front of a masterpiece. Still take the time to sit down on the mountain and enjoy those moments. Fourth thing I encourage you all to do is keep your cup full. We've all heard it, you can't pour from an empty cup. This one is open to you. What do you enjoy doing? What brings a smile on your face every morning when you wake up? What do you do when you are on a Friday night and you're getting off of work? Try to incorporate those things intentionally into your daily schedules. Make sure that you're writing them down and you tell people, I can't do that. I'm making time for myself. I need to keep my cup full. And then surround yourself around those people that are pouring into your cup and let them know, hey, thank you. I really appreciate you doing that for me. And they'll continue to do it because you vocalized it. And the last thing I want to share with you all is to please stay grounded in positivity and stay grounded in your why. There's a lounge in every school building and people get together and they just gossip. Limit your time there. Maybe go sit in your car, go sit in your classroom, go sit in a friend's classroom and talk about the great things that your kiddos are doing. When you get into the PLC, those are the meetings that teachers have every week to talk about things that are going on. Start off with something positive. Maybe norm on something amazing that your kids did that week. And then if you're struggling, talk about what other people are doing. You see the great work that is happening in your classrooms. And you hear about the great things that the kids are going down the hallway screaming about, the projects, the real life connections that they're making. Celebrate each other. Ground yourselves in positivity and limit yourself to the things that we can get sucked into in the educational fields. And then all of us said at the very beginning that we're bringing a lot of ourselves into the classroom. With that comes your why. We could spend literally an entire presentation talking about why we do the work that we do. I know I could. I'm so passionate about being in the classroom. And my list of whys is very long. And at the end of the day, when you find yourself struggling for whatever reason, remember one, your babies need you. There has been an exodus of people leaving many fields, but educators, those of you who are super passionate, stay grounded in your why. And just remember the kids who need you now more than ever. And then definitely stay away from the negativity. Anything that just doesn't put a smile on your face. I'm really big on energy. Make sure you're filling yourselves with positive things every single day. As I mentioned, my time here is short, but I want to leave you with one of the quotes that drives me. I put it at the bottom of all of my emails, and it's near and dear to my heart. It's no dejes para mañana lo que puedes hacer hoy. And it stands for don't leave for tomorrow what you can do today. It is a testament of my sense of urgency in this work. I think that if we can do something for our kids right now, we ought to do it and not push it off tomorrow, because tomorrow is not promised to us. But I want to share this with you. And my hope is that we can stay connected. Anybody who's interested in sharing amazing stories about some of the cool things that you're doing inside of your classroom, I encourage you all to connect with me. I want to hear about them. I'm going to be starting Tip Tuesdays and shout out summers for the kiddos this summer. And I want to hear what your kids are doing so that we can celebrate them. Thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Questions? Or nothing while we've got her here. Privilege, have any of the questions?
Any questions for Dan, please? Or comments? I just can't thank you enough for coming. This is always the highlight of our year, and you just are just a delight to listen to. I wish I was one of your second graders. They are very lucky to have you. Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much for taking your time and coming to see us. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. Okay, and our next item is a legislative presentation and discussion by Leslie Sal, the Director of Policy from the Office of Policy. Leslie?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leslie Sale. I am the Director of the Office of Policy with the Virginia Department of Education. And I'm so glad that you are letting me intrude on your time this morning to share a little bit about my work at the agency and, of course, what has happened during the 2022 General Assembly session. I will say that I named this presentation prior to realizing that when I gave it, that work will still be underway. So this is less of a recap of the 2022 General Assembly and more of a status update. As you all may be aware, our legislators are still hard at work bringing a few bills, most importantly of those, the Appropriation Act and Budget Bill, to a close. So some of the things that we will reflect on today, or I'll share today, still have a bit of an asterisk beside them because they are still in motion and we may see some changes and tinkering around the edges. But a lot of the things that we will talk about today are fully baked and have made it all the way through the legislative process. So we can start to organize our thinking and be forward looking with those bills and pieces of legislation in mind. Next slide, Jim. I will dive in a little bit more specifically to the bills that I think will be of utmost importance for you all and your work around teacher education and licensure and educator preparation. But I did want to give a broader snapshot of the scale of work that happened during the General Assembly this year. As of March 12th, the total number of bills and resolutions that were introduced was 3,143. With the total number of bills and resolutions passed as of adjournment, again, that was March 12th, 1,767. 47 of those bills are still in conference or still pending additional discussion, but you'll see quite a bit of work happened over the 2022 legislative session and quite a bit of work still left to be done as we implement those close to 2,000 bills. Specific to pre-K-12 education, many of you all may already know this, but the Virginia Department of Education identifies, tracks, and monitors every bill related to pre-K-12 education as part of its work. So we of course want to make sure that we have our finger on the pulse of what's happening in education, but we do have an opportunity to provide feedback and support our legislators and leadership and helping think through what each of these bills are going to do in implementation. So of those pre-K-12 education bills, we looked at 250 bills this session, which is quite a bit of work for a team of 3. So we are a small but mighty team in the Office of Policy at the department. I must admit not all of these have a direct effect on education, so not everyone means that the department or board or Abtel or local school divisions are going to have an ask or task to do. But we look at the broader universe, all of the things that could potentially impact our students in the educational setting and space. So this year and in years past, something we of course keep a close eye on are health mitigation strategies and things coming out for VDH. So that 250 captures all of those things that we were looking at this session, but I will say a healthy majority of those were directly related to pre-K-12 education. Of those bills, we had 68 passed. 3 are still pending additional discussion in the legislature. So that puts us at about a 20% pass rate. For some, that may seem pretty successful. I think it was a testament to really the nature of the conversation right now. A lot of folks have a lot of ideas about how to move us forward in pre-K-12 education. Not all of them always aligning with one another. So education was a hot topic for us this year, and not always a place where we found peace in the valley. So it was certainly a big and significant part of the General Assembly's work this year. At the bottom there, you'll see some themes and hot topics that we saw over the course of session. I think most of them are probably not going to be a surprise for many of us who were following the campaigns that happened last year into last fall. Some of the things that we've seen happening in the news. If you follow General Assembly work, some of the things that are happening off season. So I think like I said, most of these will probably not come as a surprise and touch on things that are going to be related to our work in teacher education, licensure, and educator prep, notably around charter schools, college laboratory partnership schools, and other innovative school options. And then of course, components of instruction that tie into that teacher education and preparation work. Next slide, Jim. I have tried to divide these up into categories for us to help organize our thoughts in terms of the types of topics and things we did see pass the legislature. Of course, you'll see some interplay between teacher licensure and educator preparation per usual. These first sets of bills, so 5 bills here, 2 sets of companion bills. touch on the pathway to teacher licensure or licensure renewal. The intent of all of these bills, I think if you were going to put a tagline to them, is really streamlining the process for licensure, recognizing the extenuating circumstances that we've seen as the result of the pandemic, that we've seen as a result of recent upticks in refugee relocations and movements to the United States, as well as standing issues with kind of transitory nature of military families and having to move from location to location and making sure that those families are set up for success when they do relocate. So you'll see those first sets of bills, House Bill 230 from Delegate Corner, Senate Bill 154 from Delegate Locke touches on that last piece. So making sure that we are communicating clearly to our military spouses when they're eligible for licensure, so they know what they need to get the ball rolling and how quickly they can get licensure moving when there's potential relocation. House Bill 236 speaks to that pandemic piece, so recognizing the ongoing impact of the pandemic and the potential impacts that had on our teachers to earn their professional development points and complete all of their work towards licensure renewal, making sure that that's not an impediment for them staying in the classroom. And lastly, House Bill 979 and Senate Bill 68. Again, that's the piece about our uptake in refugee numbers and making sure that those that are well qualified, well certified, and capable of serving our students in our classrooms well have a pathway to licensure based on their experience in an out-of-country setting, having already earned a credential, so establishing a pathway there. For educator preparation, we saw a handful of bills related to just that topic. The first one we probably might think of as a little tangential, but will have a lot of impact on our institutions of higher education or potential impact for our institutions of higher education, which is House Bill 346 and Senate Bill 598, patroned by Delegate Davis and Senator Killian respectively, which is an expansion of the College Partnership Laboratory Schools model. For those in our institutions of higher education, folks might already be aware that there is already enabling legislation in our Code of Virginia that allows institutions of higher education with educator preparation programs to apply to the Board of Virginia to establish a college lab school. And what that means is that's creating a partnership between our K-12 providers and our colleges that are serving and preparing our teachers to make those connections, give those teachers innovative hands-on experiences in the classroom, and then of course give those students an opportunity to learn from those teachers in those innovative settings. This particular piece of legislation will expand the opportunity for institutions of higher education with or without educator prep programs to enter into a college lab school partnership arrangement with the board. I will note that there is still an application process that remains intact with this piece of legislation. So any institution of higher education interested will have to come to the Board of Education to submit their application, to submit their case, really show a need, demonstrate that they're capable and have the capacity to do the work, and that they're set up to be sustainable. Because of course, we don't want these to be set up and then fall away in 1 or 2 years, and we lose that sense of consistency for our students. So sustainability being a key piece there. This is one of the bills that is still in conference, and there is still a lot of conversation happening around these particular bills. I think most notably around how these schools will be funded, and again, making sure that sustainability piece will remain there. And another piece of it is just kind of the relationship between localities. So we know our local school divisions have a key role in thinking about the operations of our day-to-day schools, how we're serving our students, how that all gets implemented on the ground. So making sure that our college lab schools are really working with our local school divisions and collaborating with them, both in the planning and application process, but also potentially in the implementation and partnering on the financial piece as well. So those are some of the topics still up for discussion. So we will see what the model actually looks like once our legislators are done. The next bill, House 128 from Delegate Davis, establishes a new Virginia Diverse Educator Scholarship Fund and Program. And this is specific to supporting our historically Black colleges and universities, which are named in the bill as Norfolk State University and Virginia State University, to help set them up with money to finance 2 students for tuition, and that's 2 students at each of those institutions, so 4 students in total annually, to make sure that they have the resources they need to continue with their college education, and of course, hopefully circling back to a Virginia classroom. And also provide some costs associated with mentoring those students. So making sure we're supporting those individual students with a scholarship, but more broadly supporting those students at the institution by giving them strong leaders and strong mentors to help them get through the program and navigate the pipeline and the employment process. This is another bill that has been carried over into special session. I think the defining point of this will be the funding piece and making sure that if we establish that funding program, we of course are putting the money up to support that work and making sure we can support those students and types of programs. Educator preparation continued. House Bill 418. I will put a bit of a note here. I know there's a lot of content on the slide and I'm not going to do as deep of a dive here because this is a bit of a preface for a bigger bill that we're going to talk about here and I think the next slide actually around the Virginia Literacy Act. So this bill from Delegate Delaney is meant to support what we will talk about known as the Virginia Literacy Act, which is kind of a comprehensive, multi-dimensional look at how we reform how we're teaching literacy in Virginia. This piece of the puzzle is reinforcing a part of the Literacy Act that makes sure the pipeline, so via our educator prep programs, are giving the teachers the skills and resources they need to teach what's called evidence-based science instruction around the science-based reading research. So those are two terms and two concepts that are defined in the Virginia Literacy Act, and that's making sure that that's carrying over to our educator preparation program. So again, making sure that pipeline is clear and they're equipped to do that instructional work once they enter into employment with the local school divisions. Oh, I'll hit all of these. So a few other pieces of this. This does have a stakeholder group coming together for the Virginia Department of Education to make sure that what we do in the regulatory space to support this work is well informed. So they do want to be very thoughtful about how we're thinking about these concepts around evidence-based literacy instruction and science-based reading, and that how we set expectations for both our educator prep programs and our teachers are very clearly outlined in the regulatory language and very well vetted and comprehensive. So that's a big piece of this puzzle as well. And then of course, there is an audit program as part of this. So as many of you all know, or all of you know already, that is a part of the approved preparation program for our institutions of higher education. The Virginia Department of Education does do an audit once every 7 years. This doesn't change the audit cycle or the expectations around the audit, but it does add that new content piece. So it will be looking at making sure that students are provided access to coursework around evidence-based literacy instruction, as well as demonstrating mastery around evidence-based literacy instruction as part of that audit process. But not a new requirement for our educator prep programs, just expanding some of the things that we're looking at. Thank you, Jim, for that gentle nudge there. Effective, yes, effective 24-25. And I will highlight that bullet again here for our Virginia Literacy Act. That it does give us a runway to, again, be thoughtful about how this work is going to be implemented and make sure that all of the partners in this work, since it is so multidimensional and it's going to require an ask of all of the folks in the educational field to do a lift, that we have the appropriate time to implement. So this will become effective with the 24-25 school year. Absolutely. And as I mentioned, I wanted to give that as a bit of a preface for this larger bill. Since we're spending a little bit more time on this bill, I thought it'd be a nicer round out to end on this point. But the Virginia Literacy Act was heralded through by House Bill 319 and Senate Bill 616 from Delegate Pointer and Senator Lucas, which passed unanimously out of the 2022 General Assembly. I know folks who know literacy work well know that that was a hard-fought battle to get everyone on board with how we're thinking about literacy instruction moving forward. So that was quite a big lift for the delegate and senator to make sure all of the stakeholders were engaged and on board with this piece of legislation. This is another item that is pending action from the legislature. For the most part, all of the policy pieces are in place, but all of those policy pieces will have costs associated with them. So again, that conversation around the budget being another reason why we see a little bit of an asterisk on this particular bill. As we noted with the House Bill 418, the provisions of this bill will also begin in 24-25. So all of the things and mechanics we talk about with this bill, there is also a runway for implementation. We talked about House Bill 419 on the last slide. I will note that there is one other corresponding piece of legislation here, House Bill 418, which will just make sure that schools who are using their early intervention reading initiative funds to support literacy instruction are doing so aligned with the legislation. So I know that's a little bit tangential, but did want to highlight that there are a few pieces of legislation in this larger universe here. This bill is significant. It was a large, again, I can't emphasize enough kind of the dimensionality of this particular piece of legislation. The way that I wrapped my head around it was to break it down into 6 major components that I want to highlight for you all. I will dig in a little bit deeper on the teacher education and educator prep pieces for this particular audience. But I did want to give you a sense of all of the work that's being done in this single piece of legislation. So I've used the expressions evidence-based literacy instruction and science-based reading research a handful of times here. We will find the definitions in this piece of legislation. So this is really meant to make sure that we were all talking and using the same vernacular as we talk about literacy instruction and reform in the Commonwealth. So it really kind of sets the tone, gives us the foundations for the applications of and the components of what we want to see from evidence-based literacy instruction and science-based reading research. From there, one of the big parts of it is, of course, thinking about how that's going to inform our intervention and instruction programs at the local school division level. So how does all of this work translate to changes at the school level, at the classroom level, and at the student level? So that will mean changes to core instruction as well as intervention programs. So it's again, multi-pronged approach here. One of the important pieces of this is, of course, making sure that parents are engaged and have the resources to engage along the way. So one of the items that the Virginia Department of Education will be tasked with is making sure that our parents have instructional and educational resources to support their students in this work via an online portal. And then, of course, if their student is to need intervention services, that they are engaged in that process as well. There is a staffing requirement with this bill. So this does have local school division staffing 1 reading specialist per 550 students division-wide. So I will note that that is a division-wide ratio. So if we see smaller schools, it may be that 1 reading specialist is serving multiple elementary schools. And I guess I should quickly clarify, I don't know if I noted, it's 1 per 550 K through 3 students. So not 550 students generally. This is really focused on early literacy and supporting our earliest readers and earliest learners. So that ratio is for specific to students K through 3. And again, this is a staffing ratio that will come online 24-25, recognizing that, I think everyone is feeling the effects of teacher recruitment and retention issues. So making sure that we are thinking about the pipeline piece, allowing school divisions to hire and really getting those puzzle pieces in place before implementation comes into full effect. Next 3 pieces here, which I see as 3 legs of the same stool, is our professional development and training pieces. So if we know we're going to make reforms in the school and classroom and for our students, we need to make sure that our principals, our administrators, our teachers are well equipped with the skills and resources to do so, and they're not on their own to do that. That they have the appropriate support to access those resources, build those skills, earn those professional development points to be equipped to do this work in the classroom. So there are a lot of provisions of this bill that really have either the Department of Education or Board of Education or even our institutions of higher education playing a key role in supporting our educators and being well equipped to do this work. So it's certainly not meant to leave teachers in the lurch to figure this out and move forward. It really has a strong kind of wraparound component to support our teachers and preparing for that implementation in 24-25. In addition to that, we want to make sure that our pipeline of teachers are well qualified and equipped to do the work. As I noted originally as part of the many components of this bill. So in doing so, there are components of this bill that will affect initial licensure for certain endorsement areas, just to make sure that they have been exposed and are completing study in evidence-based reading instruction or evidence-based literacy instruction and science-based reading research. That they can show and demonstrate mastery through their literacy assessment, which is Joan has already talked about as a component of work that's already underway. And then, of course, once someone is already in the classroom or already on licensure, if they're interested in digging in a little bit deeper and earning that reading specialist role, there's also a pathway for that. So establishing a micro-credential program that will allow teachers interested in early literacy to transition into that reading specialist role. And lastly, our institutions of higher education with educator prep programs will be expected to provide coursework and allow students to demonstrate mastery. And I will say that that is specific to those certain endorsement areas as well, that those candidates that are interested in coming into the field in that early literacy space are receiving the training and instruction necessary to be successful in those environments. So I want to break it down a little bit further about what that's going to mean from a task perspective. So those are thematically what the kind of end stages of that legislation looks like. But of course, as you all already know, by virtue of your work here, that's a lot of moving pieces, and it's going to require a lot of work from all of those involved and all of those stakeholders that help make those decisions. I have the next few slides organized here, focusing on work that's happening at the state level, so either the Department of Education or Board of Education, which of course will implicate you all in your work and supporting role with the Board of Education. But that's not the complete picture. So this certainly is going to also be asking plenty of our local school divisions and our educators as well, but focusing on, again, the tasks that I think will interface with the topics and issue areas that you will tackle here regularly. Specific to that, of those 6 major components, professional development and training, the Virginia Department of Education will be responsible for providing technical assistance, including literacy coaching, to local school divisions as part of that professional development model. So again, making sure that teachers have what they need to be successful in the classroom, and the state really providing a supporting role in that work. We'll also be responsible for creating a list of professional development programs that align with evidence-based literacy instruction. So local school divisions and teachers are not on their own for wading through all of the content and materials that are available to them out there. But there will be a curated, orchestrated list for those local school divisions and teachers. So there's no questions, no pre-vetting that needs to be done. They can feel confident if they take use or utilize one of those resources, that they'll be getting research and instruction and coursework and support aligned with evidence-based literacy instruction. That list will ultimately come to the Virginia Board of Education for approval. And so I should also say another reason for structuring these slides this way is you can really see the interplay between the work that's going to happen between the department and the board, and of course, implicating you all in your supporting role for the board's work. As another task for us, we recognize that some school divisions are already implementing evidence-based literacy instruction in some way, shape, or form, and they have already developed professional development programs that support their teachers and are aligned with literacy-based instruction. So for those divisions that already have the capacity or perhaps the infrastructure in place, if they want to continue using those things or even start using something that's not on the department approved list, the department will have the opportunity to approve those. So I will say, if you haven't kind of already deduced this already, a lot of the pieces of this bill are making sure that there's consistent implementation across the state. And a lot of that being via the board and state support and setting expectations for what teachers are learning, what they have access to in terms of resources. So we know teachers are being exposed to quality resources and quality instruction, which will in turn translate to quality instruction for our students. Continuing in the professional development and training space, the Virginia Board of Education will be providing guidance on high quality professional development and science-based reading research and evidence-based literacy instruction for those certain endorsement areas. And when I mention those, I'm happy to go through a list of those, but those are generally the ones, again, focused on those early reading environments and literacy spaces. Moving back over to the Virginia Department of Education, we will also be responsible for providing resources to local school divisions to make sure each division is able to implement professional development resources. So when we talk about how we support and how we help facilitate implementation, not only is there kind of a capacity piece of this, so making sure that vetting is done and there's a consistent understanding of these pieces, but there's also the funding piece. So making sure that these resources are readily available. I noted on one of the earlier slides that micro-credentials will be a part of this program. So folks who are licensed have the ability to transition into the reading specialist role and really dig in into the early literacy space. And the department will be doing that work with the board playing a supporting role in issuing guidance around how micro-credentials can be stacked or used to create an add-on endorsement for our teachers. For teacher education and licensure, as we often do, the staff will play a supporting role to both of this board and the Board of Education in making some of the necessary regulatory changes to fully implement this work. I've highlighted a few pieces of the regulatory process, well, not the process, I guess the content of our existing regulations that may need amendment or will likely need change. The first being the expectations for the literacy assessment. As I mentioned before, this is work that's already underway as we transition into the next iteration of that literacy assessment, that those pieces of evidence-based literary instruction are already included there. It will make sure that expectations for licensure and candidates for licensure, it's clear that they will have completed study in science-based reading research and evidence-based literacy instruction. And then, of course, our educator prep programs will have provided coursework and given students to demonstrate mastery in these topical areas as well. So we see that connecting back to that House Bill 419 and those two bills kind of reinforcing one another there. So I know that was a lot to digest with the Literacy Act, so we'll kind of wind back a little bit and go high level again to kind of give our brains a break. And a next part about this too is we don't have to think about these in the next year. So when I note that these bills were continued to 2023, what that means in terms of legislation is that these bills weren't killed. The expectation is that the conversation will be ongoing, but these won't be vetted or passed during the 2022 legislative session, and legislators will have an opportunity to raise these conversations again in upcoming sessions. So 3 things that we might see coming up in 2023 is House Bill 363 or whatever the equivalent will be around dismissal policies and the kind of first in, last out potential for dismissal policy there. Senate Bill 454 from Senate Voice Code would have established a teacher training corps for attracting and retaining public school students. So that may reappear on the 2023 docket. And Senate Bill 662, although a bit tangential, I thought still may be of interest for you all, is how we're collecting and reporting on our teachers, information about our teachers that we know are aligned with student outcomes, specifically around teacher race and proficiency, and reporting those on our school quality profiles. I will quickly note the Appropriation Act or some of the provisions that are happening in the, I guess, included or potentially included in the Appropriation Act, recognizing that this is, again, a large part of the discussion that's still underway. There are 2 parts of the budget that happened during the 2022 legislative session. There is a caboose budget, which closes us out for the last few months of fiscal year 22. And then the biennium budget, which is really big in terms of setting the markers and expectations for where we see financing and funding in the next 2 years in the Commonwealth. And as part of those budget discussions for the coming biennium, we've seen a lot of conversation around bonus payments for our instructional and support positions. Again, how we're funding college laboratory schools, how we might expand our teacher residency program and the Virginia Teaching Scholarship Program, staffing requirements, not just for our reading specialists, but for principals, assistant principals, and EL teachers, as well as other related topics. And I will pause there and happy to answer any questions. I will also provide Joan with a report that gives a complete picture of all of the legislation that happened during the 2021 or 2022 session. And those are highlight the bills that we didn't touch on here.
Are there any questions? If so, please, Virginia will bring you a mic.
Again, we'll share draft PowerPoint, and we'll share the exact PowerPoint as she presented today as a follow-up. And I think you also created a handout that will list every bill.
Yeah, every bill, both the ones we've discussed here as well as anything related to pre-K-12 education. So you guys have a entire lay of the land.
Okay, that took care of my second point. Excellent job presenting all this information, Leslie. It was just highly informative, and I appreciate the draft PowerPoint that we received. I have a question regarding the staffing requirements about the one reading specialist for 550 students in K3. While this is just a first step, one reading specialist for every 550 K3 students is not ultimately going to be effective. I don't know if it's going to be an SOQ position. I'm not sure. But in Bristol,
we are a high poverty school system. We have a reading specialist for every elementary school. And none of our elementary schools has 550 students. And we are working our tails off to get our students up to grade level. So this additional funding is being picked up by the local, not by the state. So that's an issue that we have to sacrifice to make sure our students are making the progress they need to make to be educated citizens. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know I'm preaching to the choir. It is a hardship, and we cut other things so that we can make sure our students are learning. Do you know if anything will be done with the at-risk add-on, if that can be used for providing more reading specialists at the elementary level?
Sure. Well, and I will answer that question. And before I even do that, I will add a few other pieces of the bill that I didn't highlight here, but I think will be meaningful. So currently, as it stands, reading specialists are hired at the discretion of local school divisions. So this is the first time there is a requirement to staff reading specialists. And a part of this bill does have the Department of Education creating a plan for data collection, particularly as it relates to student outcomes. So I think the step in this direction that has a staffing requirement that will be directly linked to student outcomes will continue to inform how policymakers move forward in terms of adjusting staffing needs and ratios accordingly. And of course, per the legislature's will. For the at-risk add-on piece, that is a part of the budget discussion. As it stands, both budgets have an expansion in terms of their at-risk add-on program. There are varying degrees in how much they're going to increase what's a scaled amount depending on socioeconomic status. My understanding is that the flexibility provisions for the at-risk funds would remain. So school divisions would be able to use that to support, and there will be additional funding available. As both budgets stand currently, of course, we will wait to see what comes from the reconciled budget eventually. But yes, as I understand it, and as the language is drafted now, that funding would be available to support school divisions and staffing.
Also, secondly, do you know if there's going to be an increase in the VDOE budget? Because when you are looking, and I know the Virginia Department of Ed is already operating with much fewer employees while we're seeing a gain in student population. And I appreciate all your efforts because we all know we're doing more with less. And we've probably already reached our breaking point and are just holding the ropes together with our hands. And so my thought is, if VDOE is providing assistance, including literacy coaching, talking about providing resources to local school divisions to ensure that each division is able to provide professional development, there have to be more positions for you all to do this, not just effectively, but with fidelity. And that will fall back to the school divisions as well, doing it with fidelity and reliability and validity. And I saw this one thing that says at no cost to the teachers, reading specialists or teachers, which means you all are absorbing the cost. And I'm just wondering if there is money in the budget, or if we know if that's part of what's in conference.
It is part of what's in conference. There was an amendment on the House side that would have included, I think it was about $7 million in both years, which would have incorporated, both the position at the Department of Education, as well as the resources necessary to provide these tangible things like micro-credentials, professional development, literacy coaching. The amendment was only on the House side, but again, given the unanimous support for both chambers on this particular piece of legislation, hope that it's an active part of the discussion of conference, but can't speak to where we will land on it, but there was money reflected in the House amendment budget.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I'm just wondering, part of this just seems like a simple math problem where have they done the math to see the total number of already licensed reading specialists in Virginia and seen the total number of K-3 students? Because I feel like we probably already don't have enough reading specialists to match that number of students within the state. And therefore, when this is implemented in 2024, we're going to be forcing some of our school divisions into non-compliance because we simply don't have enough people to actually meet this requirement. So I understand that's probably what the point of the micro-credential is, to try and get as many people licensed as quickly as possible. But a second part of the question is, who is running that micro-credential program, and is it going to be ready fast enough? Because if it doesn't already exist right now, it's not really going to be ready to help us in 2024.
Well, and I wish I had more information in that regard. Obviously, as this has just come online, we're thinking about the pieces of implementation and the actions that we'll need to take to, again, be responsive to both the legislation as well as the needs of the educator community. I can't speak to the ratio. I know that the department did provide information on our existing pipeline of reading specialists, but the hope is that, again, as you noted, through the micro-credential programming, through changes to the institutions of higher education and the educator prep programs, that hopefully we're supporting a stronger pipeline. But I know that there are probably some practical realities here and some questions that still need to be answered. But hopefully, we'll have the opportunity to identify those questions and make adjustments as needed in that runway to the 24-25 school year.
Is that working? Yes, great. Leslie, that was terrific. Thank you. I have a question about the budget and then a comment, if I may, about the Literacy Act. But a question about the budget. And you may have done this and I just missed it. Can you compare, contrast? There's two competing budgets now that are in conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
The House budget and the Senate budget. Can you compare, contrast their respective benefits, burdens on education, sort of just the highlights on that?
Sure. The introduced budget had a number of provisions around a lot of them in kind of the technical space for making sure school divisions are getting the funding that would be needed for their particular enrollment population. I think both the House and the Senate versions of the budget have tinkered with that in some capacity. I think the Senate version of the budget has largely looks more similar to the introduced version of the budget. I think the biggest pieces that are kind of still in question are how we think about payment for our instructional or bonuses or additional compensation for our SOQ instructional positions. The Senate does, I think, have a little bit more in that regard. There would be a one-time bonus payment coming out of the caboose budget. So in the last few months of this fiscal year, there would be potentially 1.9% bonus for educators and SOQ positions, and then an additional 5% in both years in the Senate budget, whereas the House has a 4%, I believe, in both years, and the potential for an additional 1% budget. So a little bit of a difference there. College lab schools is a pretty distinct difference between the two budgets. The House bill does reflect $150 million to support the startup costs and uptake of college laboratory schools and getting those off the ground, whereas that's not reflected on the Senate side. Trying to think of some of the big items where we've seen kind of distinctions there.
Are there differences on at-risk add-on and or on SOQ positions?
Yes, so thank you for jogging my memory there. So both budgets do reflect an increase in the at-risk add-on. I don't want to, I'll give my best guess or not best guess, but from my recollection, what the ranges are. The Senate's budget has I think, a bit of a bigger range for the potential scale of at-risk add-on, up to 46% in the first year, and I think 36% in the second year, where the House, I believe, has them at 36 in both years. So the Senate would reflect a little bit more funding in the first fiscal year for the at-risk add-on program. And in terms of the staffing requirements, both budgets do reflect funding the SOQ position or anticipate in the future budget staffing for the 1 to 550 through K3. The House budget actually does have additional funding to staff one principal per elementary school, whereas right now it's at a number of students. One principal for every 500 students for assistant principals, and does have a small increase in our English language teachers, I believe to 22 per 1,000 students for English language teachers. So there are some distinctions in staffing specific to the SOQ.
Can you repeat the English language learner ratio again, please?
I believe it's 22 to 1,000. That was
in 59 and a half students for
roughly. Mm-hmm.
a comment on the Literacy Act, but I can do that now or wait until discussion time, whichever you suggest.
I would say go ahead and provide it now in this context.
Yeah, great. So if I can, just, we had some really terrific presentations at the Board of Education meeting last week on the Literacy Act, and I just thought it was, but we've heard this, Leslie's done a terrific job on the legislation. We got some context, and so, for instance, we did look at our Virginia data on reading over the last decade or so, and we were reminded that we have seen some really serious, significant drops, even though we're still slightly above the national average on the NAEP. We've seen some real drops. We've seen drops on our SOL, English language scores, and even before those, and those were pre-pandemic, and even before we saw those drops, we still had very significant gaps that have just been very, very persistent on not getting our students, of all of our students, to proficiency on reading by third grade. So that is really the impetus behind this legislation, is that this is, given that we all need to be able to read to learn after third grade, we need to learn to read by third grade, and we're not there. And so this is this act was a very significant bipartisan achievement, and it, you heard that it passed unanimously, but it was really, the impetus was bipartisan, the patrons were bipartisan, and a really impressive accomplishment. Our new superintendent was involved with CCSSO in her last job in pushing this work. So, lots of folks coming together from lots of different perspectives who may not agree on many things, all coming to agreement on this Literacy Act. And I think it's very exciting. It's all, and I didn't know all of this, so you all may know this already, but it's what I'm learning now is that the science of reading has really gotten very clear from the time of the 2000 National Reading Panel forward, on that we really do know how to teach kids to read, but we're not always doing it in our classrooms for a whole variety of reasons. But a lot of, the 5 elements from the National Reading Panel: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And that really a lot of this push, this is my take on it rather than what was said explicitly, but is that we need to be being much more systematic and thorough on the phonemic awareness and phonics. Yes, we need to be teaching children to love books and to read a lot and hear a lot, but we also absolutely need to be doing much, much more on the systematic, how to decode words, how to encode words, how sounds and syllables put together, etc. And so that's the impetus for all of this. And then what it's accomplishing is really very bold in the Virginia approach to education broadly, of trying to systematically align what's going on in not just our standards and our assessments, which are already aligned, but to align what we're doing in teacher preparation, what we're doing in professional development, what we're doing in evaluation, what we're doing at the local divisions, with what we're doing at the district, with what we're doing in the ed prep programs. And we have the benefit now of, there are a lot of benefits to our decentralized system, but there are also burdens and costs to a decentralized system. And I like to think of this as sort of going halfway to Singapore, if you would, the Singapore type system where you have a single statewide teacher preparation system and total state control, has all kinds of benefits and burdens with it. The Virginia current model is completely different from that, but this gets us by maintaining our local control over education prep programs and local districts, but working to align them all around these very clear, this very, very clear evidence on reading instruction tightly. We may be able to get some of the benefit of a centralized system without losing the value of our decentralized system. For this group, I do think that there will be some licensure implications. That micro-credential will need your advice and guidance on that. I'm told that the changes in the Praxis reading have already, what you all have already, what's already happening to Praxis is already in line with this, but there may be more changes that need to happen. One of the things we heard from about some similar efforts that have been successful in other states. And one of the things we heard is that one of the pieces that's hardest to align, interestingly, is the education preparation programs. And being based at one of those, I do understand that we value our independence, but one of the things I think this group could do would be to help our education prep programs. We've got 2 years to get aligned, but that's not a long time, right? In the way this system works. So to start helping our ed prep programs right away, think about, are you already aligned with this work? What changes do you need to be making in your programs to get here? And the time to start thinking about that is now. And the funding on this is gonna be lots of things that are still up in the air on the budget, but I am completely confident that the budget the budget piece of this is going to pass. This is happening, and we can all do our part to help make it happen well. The one last specific I wanted to say is that I'm hearing, and this I don't understand as well, and others might be able to chime in, but from the superintendent, she's really thinking of these reading specialist positions as reading coaches. That they're going to be really primary reading instruction is going to be happening in our classrooms with our classroom teachers, and the coaches are going to be helping them be doing the cutting edge science-based work. So it may be a shift in model from what we're doing in terms of reading specialists versus reading coaches. Don't take my word on that last piece as definitive, because I'm still just beginning to understand that. I just thought, because we heard so much about it at the Board of Ed, and because it is such an important change and progress, I think, but because also it will affect this group's work, we need your help on helping us get the ed prep and licensure parts of this right.
Mm-hmm. And I think this will touch on an important part as well about how the reading specialist role is going to be imagined, because the legislation does touch on some of the more, I guess, maybe conventional roles of a reading specialist around how they're going to support intervention services and direct services to students, but also that literacy coaching piece coming online, recognizing that they'll be in the classroom with teachers in schools, and the opportunity for them to support that tier 1 instruction and support teachers in addition to students, I think is an ongoing part of the conversation as the superintendent had alluded to.
I think another thing that we really need to make sure we keep in mind, as being at an educator preparation program, our students go through, they take multiple literacy courses, they have to pass the literacy assessments in order to complete our programs. But the majority of the teachers that are hired in Virginia are not coming through our programs. Many of them are coming through alternative licensure programs, and I'm not criticizing them in any way, but it is a totally different set of expectations. They have one literacy course. They can have an evaluation from a principal that says you have, or a superintendent that says you've done fine in your licensure, without a lot of the rigor that comes from a traditional teacher preparation program. And so I think it's really important, as we look at this data and we look at the achievement of students in Virginia, that we really think about where are the students that have gone through traditional preparation programs and have gotten that license in that way versus those that are going through an alternative program. And I'm not criticizing them in any way. I know phenomenal teachers that have come through both paths, but I do think when you look at the numbers, and we've been told like 15% come through our programs, 85% come from non-traditional pathways.
Especially if they're independent.
Absolutely. And even retention of those teachers, the success of the students in those classrooms, because I mean, I'm a literacy person. That is my field. That's what I studied in my PhD. I mean, I really think that we have to be very careful about kind of putting so much on the teacher prep programs, and there are other areas I think that we need to focus on as well. So I wanted to make sure that I communicated that with you while you were here.
Thank you. I knew that it was a large percentage, but I hadn't heard that 85-15. That's shocking. And that's something, if it is that extreme, something we should be trying to figure out what we can do about that.
I'll tell you, that came from Maggie Clemens. And so, yeah.
That may be
Requested today, so we'll be glad to share that when we can.
good. And yes, we should be figuring, frankly, we should be figuring out how to get more of our teachers coming through the full preparation programs rather than provisional licensing. But as in the meanwhile, I do think that the Literacy Act includes a heavy component of in-service professional development training that's going to be, as I understand it, offered by the state for free to the localities. I mean, it's part of the funding. And so, and prep programs may well be helping provide that in-service training, but the expectation and the notion is that they're going to be not counting on everybody coming in with this training. And also, we have to train all the existing teachers who may or may not have had this when they came through, whatever initial route they came through. So there is an in-service component as well as a pre-service component expectation in the legislation is what I think the bottom line is.
Well, I'm in full support. I mean, I also serve on the school board. I'm in full support of training for professional development. I do think that is something we consistently need, but I do need to know that teacher prep piece needs to make sure that it's put in perspective as we have these conversations.
And as you know, the VOE recognizes
Your mic is not on.
Sorry, the VOE does recognize and approve, in quotes, the career switcher programs. And so that potentially could be another area that the licensure committee and the licensure office will also need to do some alignment, not just the traditional regulations, but for those alternate programs as well. Just reminding myself, really. Mag, do you have a question? Another comment?
Excuse me, the pipeline of reading specialists is, I hear is fairly strong, I guess, so that's a great thing. Or did I misunderstand? Okay, so that's awesome. However, if you take the best coming out of that pipeline and assign them 100 students in an impoverished school system to service, they're not going to be effective. So they can't work miracles. I'm interested to know the science or the research behind the number 550, 1 out of 550. And I would be interested to know if they have considered looking at the ratio based on locales, because you may be able to get by with the 1 in 550 in a more in a larger school system with more affluent populace, as opposed to the rural school system that may be much smaller, lacks resources, and much more impoverished. They could require maybe 5 times that number. And I'm guessing, but I would like to know the science behind how the 1 out of 550 came about, and I would like to encourage them to look at assigning their ratio based on locality and need.
And I can share that I will admit, I think the 1 to 550 might have been shaped around kind of the practicalities of funding at this stage, recognizing that it's always a step in the right direction by adding the staffing requirements since it's discretionary now. So I think the next part of that conversation is when the data piece comes online, and being able, again, to more clearly reflect on what we're seeing from the outcomes perspective based on this new ratio, and then, continuing to grow and adjust. The ratio is division-wide, so I think that gives the divisions a lot of discretion in how they're deploying these reading specialists. So obviously the intent is to make sure that every student is in some way, shape, or form being served by a reading specialist, whether their teacher is being supported by one or they are being supported by one via intervention services. But if a particular school needs additional support, but one has very few students in need of intervention students, maybe the time is deployed in a different way with the school more in need and spends less time at the school. So there is, so I think, some flexibility in deploying the different provisions.
If there is a significant number of Virginia's K-3 student population who are not learning to read adequately, somewhere else so that we can find what we need to do to get these kids to learn to read efficiently by third grade. That's the only budget conversation, I'm sorry, that they should be having. Is what are we going to cut elsewhere so that we can find this need?
One more time. There we go. Let's draw. I'll remind you, my name is Nancy Welch. I'm a current school division superintendent. However, I am properly licensed and endorsed as a reading specialist in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'd like to say that with this legislation, I fully 110% support what this looks like on paper right now, because it's addressing what's happening in practice in our schools. It's addressing our teacher prep programs, but there's one component I'm a little concerned about, and that is someone like me who was trained in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, who has been out of practice, the hands-on component, but I still hold that endorsement as a reading specialist. I recognize that I would need to move through that micro-credentialing path for very explicit training so that I've become up to speed with the current research. And I think that is vital, because I'm thinking about what's happening in Bristol. You have a lot of reading specialists, but they may not be up to speed on the science of reading and developmental reading specifically, like this legislation that it has laid out. So just food for thought. Not just because we have reading specialists out there like me doesn't mean that we have that basis and that we're practicing that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Oops, sorry. I'm with Mr. Carter, and I think he had some excellent comments. One reading specialist per division for 550 students. I looked up Bland County, where out near where I live. Their total, this is based on 218 data, K through 4, they have 257 students. They're very rural. It's going to hurt them to have a reading specialist because they don't qualify. And as far as SOQ positions go, not one school division in our Commonwealth operates totally and completely on SOQ positions. So, I know it means standards of quality, but one day every five, and while I appreciate that it is it'll be mandatory now instead of at discretion. We talk about a high quality education, we talk about our teachers being high quality, yet these SOQ positions are not indicative of our verbal commitment to quality. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. The legislators have to look at the funding for the benchmarks for SOQ positions, because you mentioned SOQ positions will get a 1.9% bonus. Bonuses don't go towards VRS, and also, a lot of school divisions do not want to just give SOQ positions a bonus and not give it to non-SOQ positions, because I'm here to tell you, and I think every classroom teacher will tell you, our paraprofessionals, we couldn't do it without them. And we're working hard just to give them a living wage when they can go to Target and make more per hour when they're in our school divisions and they're making a difference. I applaud the first steps. I applaud that it's mandatory now. We've got to dig a little deeper.
I'm going to suggest that in future meetings, we'll try to also bring in some of those that did the presentation, Ms. Colton, from our Innovation and Learning Department to kind of unpack a little bit more regarding the literacy and especially the micro-credential piece.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think even your teacher preparation programs, the offer reading specialist programs, we need to know kind of what does that look like if we're going to need to pivot.
So we could try to get that on the agenda for April. So I guess I'm just suggesting that we'll have more time to discuss this and actually probably have some of the experts in those areas. And then, as we know, we'll have time to break out in your committees, if you're involved in the teacher prep committee and in the licensure committee, to unpack some of these others. And, you know, of course, I'll give some guidance around some of those things, but again, just give you some time to think and process before our next meeting in April. But I certainly will try to get some of those experts to come and give us some more information.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a comment about the Virginia Department of Ed and their preparation related to the science of reading. Pre-pandemic, the VDOE offered a meeting here in Richmond, I believe, and it was on the science of reading. And a follow-up to that, they provided free online training for faculty in the colleges who taught the literacy and reading courses. I took one this summer. It was the Letters program. It was based on the science of reading on Dr. Motz's research out of Yale. So it's been in the works, and there are preparation programs who are currently teaching the science of reading. So it's not that we're starting from ground one.
So I had a question actually, and this is not related. This is House Bill 233 with the 2-year extension, which I was really excited to hear that because I'm one of those people where it's about to expire. So, but my question is, and maybe it's for Maggie or anybody else in this committee, but if you apply to renew your license this year, is that going to reflect now, or is it going to do after the 2-year extension? Then you get your renewal. So that's my question. When does the renewal actually start? Is it going to start now if you sent your stuff in and you know it goes through or whatever, or is it going to happen after the 2-year extension?
It's 22, effective in 22, correct? I mean, excuse me, 24. I just want to confirm the date.
Yeah, so it would be, right now, it would be an extension of your existing license for the additional 2 years. And so the renewal cycle for a new license would begin in 24. Okay, so even if I sent my renewal stuff in already and my license expires in 2022, so the June 30th, whatever. So that doesn't take effect until after the 24. Okay. Well, you can still renew your license if you have everything that you need in place, and that would start now. If you're renewing your license, if you're interested in the extension, you can apply for the extension, get the additional 2 years, and then the licensure cycle would start again in 24. So we recognize that some folks might be interested in go ahead and renewing their license because they have everything wrapped up. But just wanted to make sure those folks that have seen the impacts of the pandemic and not been able to complete professional development reports had another option as well.
Yes, I was just gonna say, anything that is submitted for renewal now up through June 30, then your license will renew. You'll get a 22 to 32 10-year license. But for people that don't have renewal requirements met, that are not going to happen met by June 30, then divisions can request that 2-year extension that will go from 22 to 24.
Shelley and Micah.
One more comment, I guess.
And this is kind of a comment, Andy Cox from UVA Wise, and we're from the teacher prep side of things, but as I guess this is kind of something I think we all need to be mindful of, and that is that sometimes when we send messages about change that needs to take place or where we're moving with updates in education, we sometimes send the wrong message that teachers have been doing something wrong for years and years. And that I guarantee Dr. Walsh over there is probably still a fantastic reading specialist. And even though it's been some years off, I think as I go out and I try to recruit people to be teachers, is that it is becoming harder and harder to convince folks that it is a wonderful career and a wonderful field and everything about it. You know, what we heard this morning here from our teacher of the year is everything that's right with education. And what I think is we are moving forward with things, then we need to be mindful that our folks aren't doing something wrong and that they aren't, that we need to send that message in the right way. I know that as a principal, whenever I would interview folks, how things have changed, I would interview folks, and I remember having a candidate tell me one time I want to be a teacher so I could have summers off. And I remember thinking, hey, you know what, I'm not that you're the right candidate. However, so last semester, I was talking with some students who I had hoped would be teachers, and I was trying to recruit them. And at the very end of it, I said, and you get the summers off. So I think as we move forward with this, is that we need to keep in mind is that our folks are doing a tremendous job, and morale right now, I know the profession seems to be teetering in ways that are entirely under our control, but we do have the ability to put a positive twist on things and be more of that support than, hey, you all haven't been doing this right for years and years. Thanks.
If we have no further comments, we'll move on to our next item on our agenda. Thank you so much, Leslie. Legislative updates right now are a tricky thing, and we appreciate you coming and sharing with us. It was just really informative and such a great way to learn this information.
Thank you all.
The next piece that we have is we're looking at the review and recommendation to approve new education endorsement programs at institutions of higher education. This was included in your packet. There's 2 programs from Avery University, one in English as a second language, one is math specialist for elementary and middle school. Liberty University has science, earth science, and science physics. Randolph College Theater Arts, University of Richmond, elementary education graduate, English graduate, history and social science graduate, mathematics graduate, and then Virginia Tech elementary education undergraduate. We will need to separate these out. First, I'd like to know if there's any comment about the approval of these programs or anything that we need to discuss. The next step of this will be that we'll have to look at these separately to allow those of us who work at these institutions to recuse ourselves. And so the first thing I'd like to do is see if we have a motion to approve the programs at Averett, Liberty, and University of Richmond as a group, because we can do these as a group, correct? I think that's how we've done them in the past, is to do them as a small group. So do we have a motion to approve those programs? So moved. So moved.
Jessica Jones, second.
Andrew Dare made the motion and Jessica Jones seconded. Then we need to do, I'm assuming, a roll call vote on those. Sorry about that.
Nancy Bradley.
Aye.
Andrew Dare. Nancy Walsh. Peggy.
Aye.
Gary Carter. Janine Holly.
Aye.
Tracy Mercer.
Aye.
Charlotta Williams. Selena Dickey.
Aye.
Mary McIntyre.
Aye.
Stephen Whitten. Sherry Hatton.
Aye.
Jessica Jones.
Aye.
Jennifer Andrews.
Aye.
Diane's not here. Andy Cox.
Aye.
Sarah Gross.
Aye.
Shelby Elliott.
Aye.
Travis Burns.
Okay.
Ayes have it.
The next one will be the motion to approve the program from Randolph College. And so do we have a motion to approve the program from Randolph College?
So moved,
All right.
second, Jennifer Andrews.
First by Charlotta Williams, second by Jennifer Andrews. And then we're going to do another roll call vote.
Could you repeat that once again so the camera helping record?
Yes. I know Charlotta, were you the second?
No,
All right, Charlotta made the motion and Jennifer Andrews seconded the motion.
You ready?
All right, roll call vote.
Nancy Bradley.
Aye.
Andrew Dare. Nancy Welch. Peggy.
Abstain.
Thank you. Gary Carter.
Aye.
Back. Janine Conley. Tracy Mercer. Charlotta Williams. Selena Dickey. Mary McIntyre. Stephen Whitten. Sherry Hatton. Jessica Jones. Jennifer Andrews. Diane, is not here. Andy Cox. Sarah Gross. Shelby Elliott. Tracy Burns. Travis Burns. Sorry. Mr. Travis Burns. Thank you. I have it.
Okay, and then the last, we will need a motion to approve the program from Virginia Tech.
Tracy Mercier, I move.
Second, Peggy Schindler.
Second, Peggy Schindler.
Versus Tracy Mercier.
Tracy Mercier.
Roll call vote.
Nancy Bradley.
Abstain.
Andrew Dare. Nancy Welch. Peggy Schindler. Gary Carter. Janine Connolly. Tracy Mercer. Charlotta Williams. Selena Dickey. Mary McIntyre. Stephen Whitten. Sherry Hatton. Jessica Jones. Jennifer Andrews. Andy Cox. Sarah Gross. Shelby Elliott. Travis Burns. Ayes have it.
Okay, and I want to say thank you to Janelle and her team. They have worked nonstop to get these things. I mean, we've been emailing at 11 o'clock at night. So I know that she has worked very hard on that and we appreciate that. All right, and then our next item on our agenda is a report from Maggie Clemens on regarding upcoming statutory requirements.
Sure, and a written report was shared with the board by Maggie. Unfortunately, Maggie was not feeling well, so she left after helping us set up. So hopefully everyone has the written document and there was no vote required. It was really an update. And I'll just quickly highlight a couple of things. If I can move over. So again, this was really a reminder for the board of various statutory requirements that were approved last year that actually will be going into effect now. And so hopefully you have that and are sharing that with your constituents. Am I sharing my screen? Let's see. So many pieces. And I'll go through all of this. It's just a written report for the record and for you to share with your constituents. I'm just highlighting again the various areas and the changes that will be required in our regulations. Most of these going through a fast track process, again, based on the 2021 General Assembly session and the related bills. Just highlighting a few related to education prep programs and graduates, K-12 general ed, areas demonstrating proficiency, understanding the role of general ed teachers in the individualized education programs, the IEP teams. Just going to highlight a few things. Education shall review and amend its regulations governing general ed. To support that, you see the specific areas that will be addressed in the changes of the regulations. And that the board shall review and amend these regulations, again, providing the specifics of the administrative process there, impact on seeking renewal and those that are pursuing initial license regarding complete training and instruction of students with disabilities in differentiation instruction. And again, these regulations were modified for the licensure programs, but were not reviewed by Abtel. So again, this board will be involved with reviewing the fast track changes. Those will come before you in the coming weeks. Again, it's just a written report, no vote is required.
Do we know how colleges of education will report that we have, like, how will those changes to the regulations be collected for in terms of matrices and?
Yes. So as is customary, the Director of Teacher Education, John L. Torbett, will be communicating with all deans and directors regarding at least 4 points that I am off the top of my head remembering. So it will be these as well as related to the cultural competencies. So in the next week or so, the emails and a prompt template will be shared with the colleges and universities and providing them the specifics of what would be acceptable evidence And then each institution would have the flexibility to determine which aligns best with their programs, providing that as well as the verification by the dean of each institution that these particular competencies will be addressed in the program, and that the demonstration of that will be evident in terms of the records held at the campus, and signing that and submitting it to our department to have on file that the institution has made the alignments. Call it our verification process. So that will be happening very quickly.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question behind you.
Jennifer Andrews, is it possible for us to get a copy of this that has the highlighting on it? The PDF that we received in the meeting materials, all the text is the same except for the titles, which is italicized. So I was looking at the portions of the text that were in boxes, but it wasn't clear what was the actual change that was being proposed.
But yes, we can certainly provide that to everyone.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay. The next thing on our agenda are liaison reports. Do we have a report from the Virginia Community College System?
No report at this time.
State Council of Higher Education for Virginia?
No report at this time, Madam President.
And then, and I believe I'm a chair, but you can call me president, but I believe I'm chair. Virginia Department of Education, that would be you, Jim Johnson.
Just a minute, and this will be very quick. We're wrapping up. This is our last item. Again, I want to thank our team for all of the item and preparation that has been used for the meeting today. I guess I have a couple of things. One, I'm going to try to share my screen with you. And also, I want to thank Ann Hope for being with us today. Again, it's always a pleasure to have her, and especially as we move forward with the Abtel process and the various items that she's bringing to us. I'll try to get my technology right.
You're good.
I think I'm sharing my screen. So one quick show. In a previous meeting, several of you asked about some data that would help inform some of our planning and decision making. So I'm making this available and sharing this with the board today. In the last couple of months, working with our data team, our staff is moving and using some of the new data that is really a product of the General Assembly's request to include more data, especially as we're trying to address the shortage as well as some of the other legislation that we even talked about today in looking at vacancies. And so this will be an in-time place for all of us to access. And so this actually is on the department's webpage on our teacher education workforce data and reports, where all of our shortage areas lives as well as salary. We added a new link, as you can see, based on the new 2021-20 data collected from the positions and exit survey. And so as some of you may know, this will replace the supply and demand. And so the data that is published is only as good as the divisions that have entered the data, right? So if there are challenges, sometimes we know with a first collection, sometimes there could be challenges, but at least it is in response to that need for having the data easily accessible publicly. So this does live on our page, and again, is based on this first year. So hopefully we'll continue to refine the process. And so this is available to anyone that you can create your own reports based on the data that was provided by the divisions. And so you can see here our first year, and you can look at this across the state by division or by school, and looking at the type of position Notice we've also included our bus drivers, especially in this pandemic season, as well as other positions that would be available. And we can set a report. I'm just going to try something just so you can see, and you can submit. And but you can get a CSV or an Excel type file. Let me try to keep up that example. So, yeah. All right. Let me make sure I'm reading. Okay, we did divisions. Let's just do, we'll get something. Non-bus drivers, all positions. And we find something. So again, it is very user-friendly, easy access for vacancies. And again, this is done once a year. Now, what you don't see is we are continuing to collect exit data. So that will go for the next couple of months for working with our school divisions. So you will have position vacancy as well as some basic information about why individuals have chosen to exit their position, not necessarily the division or the profession, but the position. So again, we'll share this in the meeting minutes and follow up with you. But again, as we are trying to be more transparent, provide data, and helping all of us make some decisions, this is one tool I wanted to demonstrate today. And then also thank those that are participating with me in a collaborative with 14 other states focused on licensure and teacher education. And just again, I know Eric Moffa, who's not with us today, is part of that, as well as representatives from the college and university deans, as well as the ACTE, as well as a clinical faculty and some other licensure reps, helping us look at really the landscape in Virginia in comparison to other states. And so the initiative is being led by the Learning Policy Institute. And you see various other sponsors that are also helping in the initiative. So I'm just bringing your attention to that initiative and to be aware that probably in the spring, September, we're going to be sharing with you a landscape analysis in terms of licensure and teacher prep, as well as some recommendations for potentially some improvements, expansions of the pipeline, et cetera. So you'll hear more about that. And many of you will be asked to also be engaged in that process. So just giving you some things to look forward to as we look forward to our next couple of meetings. That's it, Madam President. All right, Chair.
That's all right. So our next meeting will be April 18th, which is the Monday after Easter, I believe. And so we will see you all there. And with no further business, we are adjourned.
But you know, so we've got time to pack up and move to the weekend area. And then we'll have one committee today on the teacher ed committee, and Peggy will be leading that initiative. And Leslie will be staying behind, who also is here in terms of policy. Some of those are never going to be. So we're excited about that opportunity.